Hello, I hope you enjoy this story. Please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment for more daily stories. Thank you. Elena Morgan pressed her palms to the kitchen counter and breathed in the aroma of garlic, rosemary, and slow-roasted duck. She had spent the afternoon coaxing each dish toward perfection, tasting sauces, adjusting spices, and plating with the quiet care of a jeweler setting stones. The apartment around her glowed in candlelight that flickered along framed photographs of happier times. Her and Graham grinning beside a Lisbon tram, the two of them wrapped in scarves beneath Kyoto maples, both waving from a sailboat off Santorini while sunset painted the sea in molten copper. 10 years of marriage, an entire decade punctuated by tiny triumphs and subtle fractures. The last 8 months had cracked something essential, yet Elena refused to let tonight collapse under that weight. She smoothed the skirt of her deep green silk dress, a shade that made her hazel eyes luminous, then tucked a curl behind one pearl drop. Everything had to whisper the promise of renewal. She moved through the dining nook, adjusting ivory linens and repositioning crystal goblets until their rims chimed in gentle accord. Shadows danced across the oak tabletop, where a single long-stemmed rose rested beside a handwritten note that read, in looping script, "To the years still to come." She hoped the sight would soften Graham's cool distance of late, the way every conversation seemed to skim the surface of something darker beneath. 7:25 in the evening. Graham had promised to arrive by 7. Elena inhaled, steadying herself. Late again, she thought, but tonight I refused to let impatience win. A key rattled in the front door lock. The door opened with a soft exhale of autumn air, carrying crisp hints of chimney smoke from neighboring balconies. Graham stepped inside, tall and lean in a slate suit, tie loosened just enough to suggest a long day at the office. His blonde hair, once boyish, had settled into a disciplined sweep. Handsome, polished, distant, he paused at the threshold, taking in the golden candles, the linen, the duck resting under a silver dome. Elena watched him search for the right expression, the one that used to arrive naturally. His lips curved into a smile that fit like a borrowed jacket, perfectly cut yet slightly stiff. "Happy anniversary," she said, voice soft but clay. Graham closed the door, set his briefcase aside, and answered, "Happy anniversary, Elena." The words carried no heat, like steam already cooled to mist. Elena moved forward, arms half raised for an embrace, but Graham turned to hang his coat on the rack. The hug dissolved into the air between them. She masked the sting by adjusting a napkin corner. "How was your day?" she asked, summoning brightness. "Long," he replied while loosening his tie further. "Quarterly review chaos. Mergers always create extra paperwork." His tone flattened each syllable into a report rather than conversation. Elena nodded, though she no longer shared that corporate world. Her marketing agency had shuttered the previous spring, leaving her freelancing from the spare bedroom. He never asked much about her clients or the uncertainty that kept her awake some nights, counting invoices instead of sheep. "I opened the Pinot you recommended." She gestured toward the bottle, breathing beside 2 empty glasses. He came alive for a moment, crossing to the table with unusual urgency. "Ah, excellent. I have been looking forward to it all week." He lifted the bottle, inspected the label, and rotated it so the candlelight flashed across red script that Elena did not recognize. He covered the lower half with his fingers, casual yet deliberate. "A private reserve," he said. "Something we spoke about in Napa, remember?" She tried to recall that conversation but could only summon fragments of winery tours, sun glare on silver vats, his laughter lost to wind over rolling vineyards. "Still," she smiled, "you always surprise me with your memory." Graham reached for the corkscrew and removed the cork with swift efficiency. He poured a small measure into his glass, performed the ritual swirl and sniff, then nodded at some private benchmark. He poured for her, filling her goblet higher than his own. "To us," he said, raising his glass. Elena mirrored him, the candlelight catching on the ruby surface of the wine. "To us," she echoed, but she did not yet drink. She noticed a tiny quiver in his hand as he took his first sip. It might have been the strain of the day, or the November chill that had followed him indoors, yet it planted a seed of unease in her chest. They Saturday. Duck, potatoes, and salad-filled plates, but conversation lagged, flapping like a sail without wind. Elena steered topics toward nostalgia, their first apartment with the leaky skylight, the night they got lost in Palermo and found a trattoria where the owner sang opera between courses. Graham smiled at the memories but seemed to watch them from a distance, as though viewing someone else's film. Halfway through the meal, Elena ventured, "I have missed us." She reached across the table, palm up in invitation. Graham's eyes flicked to her hand. A flash of tenderness safest, but before it could bloom he glanced over her shoulder. Elena followed his gaze to the bar where a young waitress conferred with the maître d'. The woman looked pale, hands twisting a notepad. Elena withdrew her hand, cheeks warming with embarrassment. She resumed cutting her duck, though every bite tasted of tension. A shadow fell across the table. The waitress approached, balancing a tray. "Can I clear these?" she asked, voice quiet. Her tag read Sarah. Elena smiled automatically. "Not yet, thank you. We are still enjoying." Sarah nodded, but her anxious gaze flicked to Graham. Elena noticed her grip tighten on the tray before she turned away. "Poor thing looks nervous," Elena murmured once Sarah was out of earshot. "First week, perhaps." Graham forced a chuckle. Restaurants churned through staff quickly. He lifted the wine bottle and topped both glasses. His knuckles whitened again, then released. "Drink, darling. You earned it." Elena lifted her glass, but a chill whispers through her spine. His encouraging smile appeared stretched, a mask over something calculating. She pretended to sip, letting the liquid brush her lips without swallowing. He watched closely, then took a generous swallow himself. Candles flickered. Somewhere a dish shattered. Elena startled, but Graham remained still, gaze locked on her as though waiting for a cue. She set her glass down. "You seem tense, Graham. Are you sure you are all right?" He offered a slow blink. "You worry too much." But the assurance slid off her like oil on water. From the corner of her eye, Elena saw Sarah return, hovering near the bar, palms pressed to her apron. When their eyes met, Sarah gave the smallest shake of her head, barely perceptible, yet laden with warning. Elena's pulse drummed. She turned back to Graham, drawing a steadying breath. "Tell me about the merger. You said it was exhausting." Graham obliged, summarizing budget reallocations and redundancies, yet every sentence sounded memorized. Elena forced interest but scarcely heard him. Her focus shifted to the wine, to Sarah's pale face, to the tremor in Graham's hand. Inside her chest, hope crumbled like stale bread. Something was not right. Sarah Collins had served dozens of couples during her 3-month stint at El Olivier Bistro, yet tonight's pace set every nerve thrumming like an alarm. She recognized the man, though she had prayed never to see him again. 3 years earlier, when she was still a hostess, he had dined with a woman who vanished before dessert. The police came, questioned staff, and left with no body, no proof, no conviction. Sarah had replayed that night in nightmares ever since. Now the same man sat with a woman who looked painfully hopeful. Sarah had watched him slip something against the bottle's rim while pretending to polish the glass with a napkin. She had seen the faint ring of powder left behind, invisible unless you knew to look. She had swallowed her panic, knowing management might dismiss her again if she voiced a nebulous accusation. As she retreated to the service station, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Confronting him directly risked disaster. Calling the police on suspicion alone could end with nothing but apologies and the man walking free as before. She needed concrete proof. She needed to protect the wife. Her eyes fell on a vial of blue food coloring left on the prep counter from a birthday dessert order. An idea fled. She poured 2 fresh glasses at the bar, subtly flicking a single droplet of dye into one, turning the pinot a shade too dark to notice in low light but distinct enough for her own tracking. With a steady breath she returned to the table, positioning her body to block the switch from both diners. The tinted glass landed before Graham. The untouched wine sat before Elena. "To your celebration," Sarah said, forcing a calm she did not feel. She retreated, heart sprinting. Seconds ticked. Sarah pretended to polish cutlery while watching. Graham urged his wife to drink. Elena hesitated. Graham pressed again, voice low. She lifted the glass but lowered it without swallowing. Graham sighed, annoyance flickering, then drained half his own. Sarah counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3. At table 9 a toddler dropped a spoon. The clatter jolted Sarah back to the present, just as Graham's fork slipped from his fingers. Elena leaned forward. "Graham." His eyes blinked slowly, confusion swimming across his features. He tried to speak but his tongue seemed glued. His hand twitched, rattling the stemway. Sarah moved. She approached the table with deliberate calm. "Madam, I believe your husband needs help." Elena rose, chair scraping. "What is happening?" Sarah lowered her voice. "We must call an ambulance. I think something was placed in his drink, a substance that was meant for you." Elena stared, horror dawning. Graham's head sagged forward, lips mumbling nonsense. "Who are you?" Elena whispered. "My name is Sarah Collins. 3 years ago this man dined with another woman who disappeared. I recognized him tonight. I switched the glasses." Elena pressed a hand to her mouth, realization and revulsion intertwining. "You saved me," she breathed. "Please, step back." Sarah signaled a passing waiter. "Call emergency services now." The restaurant erupted in chaos. Patrons craned necks, some reaching for phones. The maître d' hurried over, alarm etched across his composed facade. Graham slid sideways, knocking the wine bottle, crimson pouring across linen like spilled blood. He attempted to stand, but his knees buckled. Elena's instinct to help warred with the knowledge that he had intended to harm. She clutched the chair back, knuckles white. Sirens approached, the distant wail threading through the clink of dishes and murmur of fear. Sarah guided Elena away from the table to a quieter corner near the bar. Elena's voice trembled. "How did you know?" Sarah swallowed. "Because I saw him poison someone else. I always feared he would strike again." Tears filled Elena's eyes, not just of terror but of the shattering of 10 years of trust. "What was I missing?" she whispered. Before Sarah could answer, paramedics burst through the door, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. They assessed Graham, now semi-conscious on the floor, lips tinged gray. A paramedic called out vitals, started oxygen, and began an intravenous line. Officer Maria Ruiz approached Sarah and Elena. "Who saw what happened?" Sarah stepped forward. "I did. I have information about a previous incident." Ruiz took notes, eyes sharp. "We will need formal statements." She turned to Elena. "We will keep you safe." Elena nodded, though safety felt abstract, a concept floating above the shards of her life. Her gaze drifted to Graham being lifted onto a stretcher, wrist slack, eyes glazed. She felt no vindication, only a hollow, keening grief. As paramedics wheeled him toward the door, Graham's gaze landed on Elena. A flicker of pleading crossed his features, but the ambulance swallowed him before any words could form. Elena's knees buckled. Sarah caught her, guiding her to a chair. The room pressed in with a roar of voices and clattering cutlery. Elena closed her eyes, breath shallow. Overhead, the chandelier's light fractured through tears, scattering her world into prismatic pieces. The police cordoned off L'Olivier Bistro, officers securing statements, forensic technicians photographing the table, the spilled wine, and the ring of powder discovered on the bottle's mouth. Elena sat wrapped in a gray blanket provided by the maître d', though no chill could rival the frost crawling inside her chest. Detective Jonah Lefevre arrived, coat flaring behind him, his expression composed yet urgent. He spoke first with the medical team, then with Officer Ruiz, before approaching Elena and Sarah. His baritone carried the calm of experience. "I am Detective Lefevre," he said, crouching to meet their eyes. "I understand you prevented a tragedy tonight. I need to hear everything, from the beginning." Sarah recounted her earlier sighting of Graham with Violet Ames, the vanished woman, her memory of the drugging gesture, and the decision to swap the glasses. Elena listened, arms wrapped around herself, the narrative painting horror in strokes she had never envisioned. Jonah nodded, occasionally scribbling notes. "Miss Collins, your quick thinking likely saved Mrs. Morgan's life." Sarah's shoulders sagged. "I only wish I had acted sooner." Jonah's gaze softened. "Regret is natural, but you acted decisively when it mattered." He turned to Elena. "We will bring you to headquarters for a full statement, but first, is there someplace you can stay tonight?" "My sister lives in the suburbs," Elena whispered. "I will go there." "Good. We will arrange transport." A forensic technician approached Jonah, holding an evidence bag with a folded square of foil. "Trace amounts of zolpidem and carisoprodol," he confirmed. Jonah exhaled, then addressed Elena. "The substance is a powerful sedative combined with a muscle relaxant. With alcohol it can cause respiratory failure. The dose appears calibrated." Elena's stomach heaved. Calibrated for my weight, she realized. He planned this. Jonah placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. We will investigate every detail. For tonight, focus on rest. Sarah touched Elena's arm. You are not alone, she said. Elena met her eyes, gratitude shining through grief. Thank you, she murmured. Police escorted both women to an unmarked car. Outside, cold rain began to fall, hissing on pavement. Elena watched blue and red lights strobe against wet asphalt, feeling as though she stood outside her life, observing a stranger's calamity. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the restaurant's entrance where candles still flickered in the window. Moments ago those flames had promised romance. Now they illuminated a crime scene. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass of the car window and let silent tears trace down her cheeks. Somewhere ahead waited a long night of questioning, evidence, and the unraveling of memories she once treasured. But in that hollow ache she felt a thin thread of resolve knitting itself together. She had survived the first strike. She would face whatever revelations came next, even if they toppled everything she thought she knew about love and devotion. The car turned onto Riverside Drive, city lights shimmering on the river below. Elena closed her eyes, drew a slow breath, and clung to the single truth Sarah's bravery had carved into the evening. She was still alive. Life, fragile yet fierce, awaited the next chapter, and she would meet it on her own terms. Elena watched flashing lights recede through the rain-specked rear window of the unmarked sedan that ferried her and Sarah to Midtown Precinct 11. The driver, Officer Maria Ruiz, maintained an even 50 kilometers per hour, windshield wipers ticking like a metronome. For several minutes no one spoke. Elena pressed the blanket tighter around her shoulders, replaying the moment Graham's fork slipped from his fingers. The clatter had sounded like a gunshot in a chapel. At last Sarah cleared her throat. I know the interior of a police cruiser is not exactly comforting, she said, voice thin but steady. But you are safe here. Elena turned, studying the woman whose quick thinking had altered the night's trajectory. Sarah appeared younger in the dome light, lashes wet from recent tears, but her jaw held a determined line that belied her age. I keep wondering, Elena said, her words emerging raw. How many times I missed signs. Did I ignore them because I loved him or because I feared losing him? Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. People like him count on trust. They practice ordinary kindness just enough to hide cruelty. She paused, swallowing. My grandmother used to say that evil rarely announces itself. It whispers. Officer Ruiz adjusted the rearview mirror, her gaze sympathetic. Detaching guilt from survival is hard, Mrs. Morgan, but you did nothing wrong. Elena managed a nod, yet shame pulled despite assurance. She thought of late nights when Graham claimed budget meetings, of his insistence she settle freelance invoices through an account he managed. She saw now how neatly he had pressed her toward dependence. Rain intensified, drumming on the roof. Ruiz turned up the heater. Outside, neon signs bled color onto wet asphalt, casting liquid rainbows beneath passing tires. As they neared the precinct, Sarah spoke again, softer. When I realized he was the same man, I froze. I almost walked into the freezer just to breathe. Then I remembered Violet's purse in the lost and found cupboard. 3 years, still unclaimed. I could not let another purse sit there. Elena laid a hand over Sarah's. You were brave. No, Sarah whispered, tears returning. I was terrified. Courage is action despite terror. The car slowed before a sandstone building trimmed in steel. Ruiz parked beneath an overhang where orange sodium lights hummed. She opened the rear door, rain pelting her uniform. We will head straight to interview rooms. Detectives are waiting, and coffee is brewing. Inside, stale warmth wrapped Elena, smelling faintly of copier toner and strong roast. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead. Ruiz guided them past a reception desk where a sergeant collected phones and personal items. Elena surrendered her clutch, noting her hand shook less than when she had first stepped off the restaurant cab. Perhaps adrenaline was ebbing. Perhaps shock had settled like sediment. Detective Jonah Lefevre met them near a bank of frosted glass doors. He had exchanged his trench coat for a navy blazer but retained the deliberate calm Elena remembered from the restaurant. Thank you, officer, Jonah said. I will take it from here. He motioned to 2 separate rooms. We will speak individually at first. It keeps timelines precise. Sarah, follow Detective Malhotra. Mrs. Morgan, if you will come with me. Elena's throat tightened at the formal address, yet she appreciated the courtesy of her married name. She followed Jonah into a room furnished only with a small oak table, 2 padded chairs, and a recorder whose red light blinked patiently. A carafe of coffee steamed beside a glass of ice water. Jonah gestured for her to sit. He set down a thin folder and powered the recorder. For the tape, this is Detective Lefevre with Elena Morgan at 02:15 hours. Mrs. Morgan, before we begin, do you understand you are not under arrest? You may stop at any time, and you may request counsel. Yes, I understand. Would you prefer an advocate present? Elena considered. Not yet. Jonah nodded and eased into the chair opposite. Let us start with your dinner reservation. Who chose the venue? Graham did. She described his text message the previous week, his insistence on a private booth at El Olivier, his note about making the 10th anniversary memorable. When did you first see the wine bottle? He placed it on the table as soon as he arrived. He covered the label with his hand. I thought he was teasing me. Jonah wrote a note. Did he excuse himself at any point before you sat down? Only to hang his coat. She frowned, recalling how he had lingered near the coat rack for perhaps 30 seconds, back-turned. He could have handled the bottle then. Jonah leaned back, expression unchanged, but Elena saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, at a detail aligning with the timeline. You did not drink. I touched the wine to my lips. I never swallowed. He clicked his pen. Tell me your immediate impression of Sarah Collins. Elena explained the waitress's unease, her darting glances, the slight tremor. It read as worry. In hindsight, I know why. Jonah steepled his fingers. Mrs. Morgan, I want to warn you we found items in your husband's inner coat pocket, a small vial containing residue identical to what was on the bottle, and a folded page listing dosages by body weight. Your name was written at the top. Elena's pulse thudded. He recorded it, as if drafting a recipe. I am afraid so. Jonah's voice remained gentle. It will help the prosecution. Elena stayed at the cup of water, condensation sliding like tears. He measured my life in milligrams. Jonah closed the folder. May I ask about your marriage during the past year? Elena recounted late nights, his abrupt shift from affectionate to cool, her suspicion of an affair that never materialized, her half-hearted attempts at counseling that he postponed. She described financial stresses, freelance income irregular, his insistence they keep separate accounts for clarity, though he still monitored hers. Did he ever threaten you? Jonah asked. Not directly. She paused. But silence can be threatening. He weaponized it. Jonah nodded, as if he understood. I will not keep you much longer tonight, but there is one more matter. He slid a photograph across the table, Violet Ames smiling beside a blue bicycle. Do you recognize her? Elena shook her head. This is the woman Sarah referenced. She vanished 3 years ago. The case stalled without leads. Tonight may reopen it. Elena's eyes filled. Her family needs truth. They will have it. Jonah clicked off the recorder. We are finished for now. Elena stood, knees stiff. What happens to Graham? He is in custody at St. Adrian Medical, under guard, Jonah replied. Doctors are stabilizing him. When he is coherent, detectives will Mirandize and interview him. She inhaled, then managed, May I leave for my sisters? I will arrange a cruiser, Jonah said, escorting her to the hall. Your sister's address. Elena provided it. Jonah radioed for transport, then turned back. Mrs. Morgan, rest is not surrender. Take tomorrow to breathe. We will update you. She nodded, grateful. A uniformed officer guided her downstairs. Rain had slowed to a mist that silvered street lamps. As she climbed into the back seat, exhaustion settled over her like wet wool. Yet beneath it pulsed a new, slim resolve. She would stay awake to every detail from now on. No more drifting through rehearsed conversations. No more silences left unchallenged. Deputy District Attorney Lila Grant arrived at St. Adrian Medical an hour later, brisk in charcoal slacks and a tailored coat. She joined Detective Malhotra outside Graham's room, reviewing lab reports. Graham lay conscious, pupils sluggish, wrists cuffed, and 4 dripping clear fluid. Lila introduced herself, voice firm. Mr. Morgan, I am prepared to record your statement. You have been advised of your rights. Graham's voice rasped. I want my lawyer. That is your right, Lila said. But time is crucial. The substances found match those connected to other disappearances. Cooperation may influence sentencing. Graham's eyes slid closed. 4 long seconds, no sound but the monitor's steady beep. Finally he whispered, she was leaving me. Mulhotra leaned forward. Your wife? All of them, Graham muttered. They always leave. His lids fluttered. I only heard the goodbye. Mulhotra swallowed revulsion. Lila signaled the hospital guard. This interview is terminated until counsel arrives. In the corridor, Lila rubbed her temples. Classic narcissistic rationalization, she murmured. We will need every scrap of evidence. You will have it, Mulhotra assured. Margaret Danvers opened her front door at 4:45, hair askew, robe cinched tight. Her younger sister stood on the porch under a porch light blooming halos in the mist. Elena clutched a police-issue duffel containing the ruined green dress and a pair of slippers. Elle, come inside. Margaret enveloped her in a hug that smelled of lavender detergent and stale coffee. Elena trembled but did not cry. Tears had dried into a salt crust during the ride across the river. Margaret guided her to the living room couch, where a fleece blanket waited. I will make tea. Elena sank onto cushions, eyes roaming framed photos of Margaret's 3 children, their gap-toothed smiles a balm. The grandfather clock ticked 5. Somewhere a commuter train hooted. Tea steamed on the coffee table. Margaret sat beside her. Start wherever you can. Elena's voice emerged frayed. She recounted the evening, Sarah's warning, Graham collapsing, evidence at the precinct. Each sentence felt like pulling needles from cloth. Margaret gripped her hand, knuckles blanching. When Elena finished, silence settled, punctuated by the hiss of the radiator. Margaret finally spoke, soft but fierce. He could have killed you. Elena nodded. He planned to. Margaret fetched a tissue. How are you still upright? I do not know, Elena admitted. Shock is scaffolding, I suppose. Margaret exhaled. You will stay here as long as needed. The guest room has clean sheets. Elena sipped tea, scalding her tongue yet welcoming the pain as proof of living. She stared at steam curls, remembering candle smoke curling over spilled wine. I keep thinking about our first date, she whispered. He joked about choosing a pizza topping too quickly. Said patience made pleasures richer. It sounded wise. Now I wonder if he was measuring me even then. Margaret squeezed her shoulder. You are not defined by his darkness. But I feel painted by it, Elena said. Like standing under a lamp that only casts his shadow. They talked until dawn leaked pink through blinds. Eventually Margaret coaxed Elena to sleep in the guest room. Elena lay beneath a patchwork quilt, eyes tracing hexagon patterns, but rest came fitful, punctured by dreams of glasses switching endlessly, liquid turning to tar. She rose mid-morning to coffee aroma. Margaret stood by the stove flipping pancakes for the children, who prepared for school with hushed curiosity. Elena forced a smile, greeted them, and marveled at how ordinary life continued, as unstoppable as tide. Later, Detective Lefevre phoned with updates. Graham stable, awaiting arraignment, bail opposed. Preliminary tests on the wine revealed enough sedative to still a full-grown man. Violet Ames' case reopened, with matches between residue from her abandoned purse and Graham's vial. We will need you to provide medical records for the past decade, Jonah added gently. Anything that confirms or contradicts your husband's timeline matters. Elena agreed and spent the afternoon gathering documents, insurance statements, travel receipts, old photographs. Each artifact felt like an antique from a civilization she scarcely remembered. Evening brought Sarah, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, yet she smiled. I found these on clearance at the florist. I am not sure lilies are proper for trauma, but they smelled like fresh air. Elena hugged her. They are perfect. The 2 women sat in Margaret's sunroom while twilight colored the sky indigo. Sarah admitted nightmares had chased her the previous night, images of Violet reaching for help across an endless restaurant floor. I replay the switch, Sarah confessed, twisting a petal. If I had fumbled the tray, he might have suspected. Elena took her hand. You did not fumble, and we are here. Sarah gave a shaky laugh. That is my new mantra. Together they plan to attend Violet's vigil scheduled by a family for Friday. I want to read a statement, Sarah said, but words feel small. Small words can hold entire worlds, Elena replied. We will write something together. Margaret passed by carrying laundry. She paused, studying their clasped hands, seeing connection forging in trauma's fire. She smiled sadly, then continued. That night Elena slept deeply for the first time since the restaurant. In her dream she stood on a cliff above a sea that glowed silver. Far below, waves erased footprints that led away from her. She felt the wind push at her back but realized she could choose whether to step forward or remain. She woke at dawn, heart calm. Morning headlines blazed. Business executive arrested in anniversary poison plot. Paparazzi clustered outside St. Adrian as Graham was transported in shackles to county lockup. Elena watched coverage with silent disbelief. She had shared toothbrush holders with that man. Now cameras captured him as a villain. Jonah called mid-morning. Forensic accountants traced your joint credit card to a storage unit rented under an alias. We obtained a warrant. I would prefer you stay away, but I think you deserve to know what we find. Elena inhaled. Tell me. 3 hours later he phoned again. We discovered personal items belonging to missing women, jewelry, phone cases, diaries. Your name does not appear, but he kept a folder of news articles about spousal disappearances. He studied them. Elena closed her eyes, nausea surging. Thank you for telling me. After the call she walked into Margaret's garden, where marigolds drooped in the autumn chill. She knelt, hands sinking into damp soil, and sobbed for the strangers whose keepsakes sat in a storage locker, their stories reduced to evidence tags. When tears subsided, she gathered the lilies Sarah brought and arranged them in a vase on Margaret's porch table. She whispered a pledge to those lost women. Your names will be spoken. The following week unfolded as a slow-moving storm, each day unveiling new fragments of Graham's hidden life. Detectives uncovered a safety deposit box containing passports belonging to 2 missing tourists, along with a notebook cataloging poisons and interactions with alcohol. Newspapers dubbed him the penile predator. Cable networks dissected every scrap, from his Ivy League education to his meteoric rise in corporate finance. Elena found herself fielding calls from reporters camped outside Margaret's cul-de-sac. Margaret installed blackout curtains in the guest room, but flashbulbs still punctured the night. Police arranged a small security detail until arraignment. Amid chaos, Detective Lefevre scheduled a joint meeting with Elena and Sarah at precinct headquarters. He ushered them into a war room lined with whiteboards, pinned photographs, and timelines crisscrossed by colored yarn. At the center stood a large screen displaying a map dotted with pushpins across 3 states. Jonah tapped one. Confirmed sighting of Graham with Violet Ames, 3 years ago. Next pin, Daniela Rios, 2 years ago. Different city but same bistro chain. He pointed to another. Erin Caldwell, last year. Conference Hotel Lounge. Sarah swallowed. All women share similar appearance. Jonah nodded. Law enforcement often misses serial patterns when crimes occur across jurisdictions and lack bodies. Graham exploited that. He clicked to a slide of handwriting comparisons. His notebook contains confessions. Forensics confirm his pen pressure. Unique slant. A jury will see incontrovertible proof. Elena clasped her hands. Will their families be spared a trial? Not spared, Jonah said, but given closure. The district attorney plans to present the confessions and physical evidence. A plea agreement may emerge, but only if families consent. Sarah stayed at the board. I want to meet Violet's mother. That can be arranged, Jonah replied. She asked to thank you both. The meeting shifted to logistics, victim impact statements, safety protocols, potential plea timelines. Jonah then dismissed detectives, leaving the 3 alone. He leaned back, expression gentler. I know you are exhausted, but one last question. Would either of you be willing to testify if the case goes to trial? Sarah answered first. Yes. Elena followed. Absolutely. Your bravery strengthens the case, Jonah said. But prepare for defense tactics. They will probe personal history, seek any inconsistency. Elena straightened. I will not let them twist grief into doubt. Jonah met her gaze, respect evident. We will stand with you. As they rose to leave, Sarah hesitated. Detective, There is something I never told anyone. After Violet disappeared, I searched social media and found her sister's account. I wanted to message but feared making false hope. Now I wonder if reaching out sooner could have helped." Jonah shook his head. Responsibility rests on the perpetrator, not on those who crossed his path. Sarah exhaled, shoulders unburdening slightly. Elena linked arms with her as they exited. Outside, midday sun glazed the precinct steps. Reporters shouted questions. Officers formed a corridor. Elena and Sarah walked through flashes of cameras, heads high. Each step felt like lifting weight off buried chests. That evening Elena joined Violet's family at a candlelight vigil in Riverside Park. Dozens gathered, holding photos of missing loved ones. Sarah read a statement they had crafted together, her voice trembling yet clear. She spoke of shared humanity, vigilance, and the power of one decisive act. Candle flames wavered in the night breeze, their glow reflected on tear-streaked faces. When the vigil ended, Elena remained by the river's edge, water catching city lights like scattered gems. A quiet presence approached. Detective Lefevre offered a travel mug. "Decaf tea," he said. Elena accepted, warmth seeping into chilled fingers. "Thank you." They stood in silence, listening to water lap against stone. Finally Jonah spoke. "Cases like this often leave survivors wondering whether trust is worth the risk." Elena watched the current, thinking of tides carrying secrets downstream. "Trust must still exist," she said slowly, "but perhaps with wiser boundaries." Jonah tilted his head. "Wise does not mean fearful." She glanced at him. "Do you speak from training?" He smiled faintly. "From scars." He took a breath. "My sister vanished 15 years ago. We never found her. That wound taught me vigilance without surrendering hope." Elena's heart clenched. "I am so sorry." "Thank you," Jonah said. "Her memory drives me. Tonight it feels honored." Elena sipped the tea, steam curling between them. "Will peace ever feel ordinary again?" "It will feel different," Jonah replied, "but it can still be sweet." They walked back toward the streetlights, not touching, yet moving in step. Elena felt the first fragile thread of future weave through her grief, tethered to a detective who understood shadows but chose to stand in light. Rain whispered against the courthouse windows the morning Graham Benedict Morgan entered his plea. Reporters clustered beneath black umbrellas, lenses fogging as they jockeyed for a glimpse of the man tabloids now called the penal predator. Elena watched from the second-floor vestibule, her reflection wavering in the glass like a ghost pressing against the present. Margaret stood beside her, one arm looped through Elena's for silent steadiness. Sarah waited a few steps back, needing the clasp of her handbag. Detective Jonah Lefevre approached, court file tucked beneath his arm. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Elena met his eyes. "As I will ever be." They followed him down the corridor, heels tapping in measured rhythm. The courtroom doors opened to reveal wooden pews packed with journalists, victim families, and curious onlookers. On the prosecution table, Deputy District Attorney Lila Grant organized binders, her silver earrings catching the overhead lights. At the defense table, Attorney Carla Whitmore spoke in hushed tones to Graham, who wore a charcoal suit that hung slightly loose on his frame after months in remand. When Elena stepped through the rail, a hush rippled across the room. Flashbulbs were barred inside, yet the collective gaze felt like strobing light. She took her reserved seat behind the prosecution, Sarah sliding in beside her. Judge Adelaide Porter entered, robe billowing, gavel landing in a single sharp crack. "Court is now in session." The clerk called the case. Graham stood, wrists free but ankles shackled beneath the table. "How do you plead to the indictment?" Judge Porter asked. "Not guilty," Graham said, voice flat. A murmur swept the gallery. Elena's stomach clenched, though she had expected the plea. The judge set trial for 6 months hence and scheduled a hearing to consider joinder of the 9 murder counts with the attempted homicide. Until then, discovery would proceed. Outside, microphones thrust forward. Lila Grant delivered a brief statement. "We will prove beyond doubt that the defendant murdered 9 women and attempted to murder his spouse. We stand with the survivors." Elena maintained silence, police escorting her to a side exit where drizzle slicked the pavement. She climbed into Jonah's cruiser, Margaret and Sarah following in a separate vehicle. Only when doors shut did Elena allow a tremor to pass through her hands. Jonah saw it. "He can delay but not escape," he assured. She nodded, gripping the seatbelt buckle. Not escape, she echoed. Yet old echoes of affection complicated the clarity of hatred. Preparation consumed winter. Prosecutors built timelines. Digital forensics traced Graham's emails that revealed pattern scouting, and financial records uncovered purchases of anesthetic chemicals under ownerless shell firms. Elena met weekly with trauma counselor Dr. Iris Han, learning grounding strategies and rehearsing testimony. Sarah balanced restaurant shifts with mock depositions, voicing the moment she switched the glasses until her throat roughened. Sometimes she would text Elena at midnight, "I keep seeing Violet's purse." Elena would reply, "You gave Violet a voice." The messages became nighttime lifelines. One January morning, Elena opened an envelope from Whitmore's office. Defense subpoenas demanded her private journals, medical files, and psychotherapy notes to search for mental instability. Grant filed motions to quash. The judge ruled journals fair game but protected doctor records. Elena boxed her diaries dating back to high school and delivered them to Grant's paralegal with hands that felt strangely detached from her body. "That is how they fight," Grant told her. "They try to turn survivors into defendants. We will not let them." Through it all, Jonah remained a quiet constant. He called with updates, walked her through evidentiary exhibits, shared progress on tracing his own sister's fate. Though her case predated Graham's crimes, he reopened it, hoping for overlap. No direct link emerged, but each new lead drew him further into Elena's orbit, and late-night phone calls sometimes drifted from legal minutiae to talk of favorite childhood books, the solace of long coastal walks, and the taste of lemon tea on cold evenings. February thawed into March. Snow receded, revealing crocus tips in Margaret's garden. One night Elena dreamed of the restaurant again, but this time she swapped the glasses herself, watching Graham drink. She woke unsettled yet oddly empowered, as if her subconscious had claimed agency. She rose, wrapped herself in a shawl, and padded to the kitchen where Margaret brewed chamomile. Rain tapped glass panes. Elena whispered, "He cannot rewrite my memories." "I will." Margaret pressed a mug into her hands. "You already are." Spring session began with a monumental evidentiary hearing to determine admissibility of Graham's handwritten confessions. The courtroom brimmed with tension as Carla Whitmore argued the statements were coerced during hospitalization. Lila Grant called Dr. Lionel Rourke, chief toxicologist, who testified Graham's cognition had returned within 4 hours of treatment, well before detectives recorded his answers. On cross-examination, Whitmore attempted to paint Rourke as an overeager prosecution ally. "You know the district attorney wants a headline, Doctor. Did that influence your assessment?" Rourke adjusted his glasses. "My assessments are influenced only by vital signs and peer-reviewed science." Judge Porter admitted the confessions, ruling Graham was lucid, Mirandized, and driven by self-interested calculation, not duress. Elena listened as the clerk read excerpts aloud. Violet lived in a dream world. I offered her a gentler exit. Daniela loved ocean spray. I let her drift deeper. Elena would have left eventually. I prepared our parting to spare us pain. Each sentence chilled the air. Mothers of victims sobbed softly. Elena's nails pressed half-moons into her palms until Sarah's hand covered hers. After court, Grant ushered Elena and Sarah into a conference room. She shut the door and leaned against it, exhaustion loosening her posture. "The confessions are in. That is the spine of the case." Elena released a breath she had not realized she held. "What now?" "We negotiate," Grant said. "If he pleads guilty on all counts, we may avoid trial. Victim families must decide whether they need to hear a jury pronounce judgment." Sarah frowned. "A trial could re-traumatize everyone." "True," Grant said, "but some families find public testimony cathartic." Elena recalled Violet's mother's fragile dignity. "Whatever they choose, I will support." 2 weeks later, Graham's counsel proposed a plea: life imprisonment without parole in exchange for skipping trial. Grant summoned families, survivors, and detectives to a meeting hall to deliberate. Chairs formed a rough circle. Violet's mother, Maria Ames, spoke first, voice trembling yet resolute. "I want the record clear, but I cannot bear months of photographs and autopsy details. I vote we accept." Daniela Rios's brother shook his head. "He chased our sister across state lines. Let 12 citizens see that." The group debated for hours. Elena listened, heart pulled in opposing directions. She longed to avoid reliving poisonings on the witness stand, yet she felt a responsibility to confront him publicly. During a break, she stepped onto the balcony where evening sun painted office towers in rust. Jonah joined her. "Conflict is normal," he said. "Closure is personal." Elena studied traffic far below. "What would your sister want?" Jonah exhaled. She was shy. A trial spotlight might have crushed her. "But your needs matter too." Elena closed her eyes, picturing Graham's meticulous handwriting. "I will follow the majority," she decided. "If families need a trial, I will testify. If not, I will read a statement at sentencing." Inside, votes tallied. 7 families favored the plea. 3 wanted trial. Grant explained judge's discretion. Unanimity was not legally required, but moral consensus mattered. The minority relented when Grant promised a sentencing hearing where each could speak. Graham signed the plea the next day, shackled wrists trembling only slightly as he wrote. Cameras flashed through the detention center window. The headline blared that evening: "Serial killer enters guilty plea, avoids trial." Elena expected relief. Instead, a hollowness opened, like anticipation ending abruptly. She spent the night wandering Margaret's dark kitchen, fingertips tracing countertop seams. At dawn, she texted Jonah, "Decision done, emptiness remains." He replied minutes later, "Healing is not binary. Call if needed." She did. They spoke for an hour, voices low while the household slept. When she finally laid the phone down, she felt steadier, anchored by the quiet fact of his unwavering presence. Sentencing required a full day on the docket. Judge Porter would hear victim impact statements before imposing punishment. Elena prepared Hayes with Dr. Hand's guidance, rewriting drafts until each sentence matched her measured breath. She chose a charcoal chute, pinned a violet ribbon beside her lapel, and carried no photographs, wanting words to carry weight unsupplemented. The courthouse corridor smelled of fresh varnish that morning. Inside, Rose filled early. Graham, seated at defense table, appeared almost peaceful, as though resignation suited him. Whitmore whispered occasionally, but he watched the podium where families queued. Maria Ames spoke first, voice quavering but powerful. "You stole my daughter's future, but you do not possess her soul. She lives where your reach ends." Others followed, a father describing his son's empty guitar on the living room wall, a fiancé speaking of wedding invitations forever unsent, a best friend recounting laughter silenced. Each statement carved air. Graham sat impassive, blinking only when a mother displayed her child's baby blanket. Finally the bailiff called, "Elena Morgan." She rose. Feet carried her almost without feeling to the lectern. Microphones captured hush. She unfolded her page but did not glance at it. She knew the words by heartbeat. "Your Honor, and to the court," she began, voice clear yet tinged with trembling honesty. "I stand not only as a survivor but as someone who once loved the man seated before you. That duality is its own cruelty. He planned to poison me with knowledge of my favorite wine, of my weight, of my trust. He turned intimacy into a weapon." Graham's eyes finally flicked up. She continued, "For years I shrank to fit the silent spaces he left, believing his distance was my failing. I now understand that his distance was the border of his deception. He feared being truly known, because truth reveals monstrous intent." She inhaled. "He did not succeed in killing me, yet he murdered versions of me. The woman who believed in our shared future, the wife who placed dream vacations on vision boards. I grieve her daily. Still, there is a version he could not extinguish, the woman who stands here reclaiming voice. I choose life unshadowed by him." She folded the paper. "I asked the court to impose the harshest sentence allowed, not from vengeance but from a commitment to protect every stranger he might otherwise encounter." Judge Porter's gaze softened. Elena stepped back. As she passed Graham's table, she felt his stare, a vacuum reaching for recognition. She did not grant it. Back at her seat, Sarah squeezed her hand, tears bright. Jonah, seated behind prosecution, offered a subtle nod. Judge Porter recessed for lunch before delivering sentence. Courthouse cafeteria hummed with muted conversation. Elena sat with Margaret, Sarah, and Jonah at a corner table near tall windows where rain had begun once more, pattering softly. Jonah stirred tea. Sentencing likely mirrors the plea, but judges sometimes add consecutive terms symbolically. Elena's appetite had fled. She crumbled a cracker, watching shards scatter like brittle memories. Sarah chewed absent-mindedly on a celery stick, gazed distant. Margaret attempted lightness. After this we will find somewhere that serves decadent cake. Sarah managed a small smile. Chocolate lava. Or lemon drizzle, Margaret offered. Elena whispered, flavor of survival. An hour later Gavel called them back. Porter re-entered, face composed with judicial solemnity. Everyone rose. The defendant has pleaded guilty to 9 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, she began. Having reviewed pre-sentence reports and considered each impact statement, this court finds the following sentence just. She pronounced life imprisonment without possibility of parole on each murder count, to run consecutively. For attempted murder she imposed an additional 50 years. She ordered Graham transferred to a maximum security facility and recommended permanent solitary classification given psychological evaluations indicating predatory narcissism. Porter's final words rang. You fashioned death as art, Mr. Morgan, but justice erased your canvas. You will leave this courtroom only for a cell where your reflections will be your sole audience. Clock recorded sentence. Bailiffs moved. Graham stood slowly, chains rattling. He glanced back once, expression inscrutable. Then the door swallowed him. A collective sigh unfurled. Reporters scrambled for the exit. Families embraced, tears mixing sorrow and relief. Elena remained seated, shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Jonah approached, gently touching her elbow. It is done. She looked up. Is it ever truly done? It is enough for today, he said. Tomorrow we keep walking. That evening a spontaneous memorial vigil formed outside the courthouse. Someone lit 9 lanterns, each bearing a victim's name, plus a tent for survivors. Elena stood among strangers, watching warm light float upward into gray dusk. Sarah laced fingers through hairs. When Elena went home with Margaret later, she opened a new journal. On the first page she wrote, Today I learned survival is not an ending. It is a stern beginning. She closed the cover and, for the first time in months, slept without nightmares. 1 year later, wind salted with sea spray swept across the bluff where Elena now lived. The small coastal town north of the city offered skylines of gulls, magazine blue waves, and cottages painted in pastel hues. Elena's was butter yellow with slate shingles and a white fence where rosemary spilled like green waterfalls. Inside, morning light streamed through lace curtains, warming hardwood floors where Ginger Cat named Harbor dozed. Elena brewed coffee, the rich aroma curling into quiet rooms. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, grand opening next month. Invite list coming. The bakery dream had blossomed. Sarah had leased a storefront overlooking the river. Elena replied with a string of encouraging words, typed out in full, no shortcuts. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, set both on the table, and sliced fresh sourdough. Moments later footsteps sounded on the porch. Jonah entered, cheeks flushed from the walk. He shrugged off a rain jacket, shook droplets from dark hair. Morning, he said with a smile that had grown familiar in the months since sentencing. After the case closed, they had taken cautious steps from professional camaraderie into gentle companionship. Shared hikes, book swaps, evenings of chess where the stakes were laughter. Elena handed him a mug. Decaf for the detective. Still protecting me from late-night insomnia, he teased, taking a seat. They ate bread with honey while gull cries drifted through the open window. Conversation meandered from Sarah's bakery to Jonah's ongoing work on his sister's case. He had discovered a possible witness, and hope glimmered where once only cold files existed. Mid-morning they drove to a cliff path where wild heather nodded in brisk wind. Elena carried a small pewter box engraved with a single olive branch. Jonah knew what it held, the shredded remains of photographs and letters Graham had written during their courtship. She planned to bury them by the lighthouse where she and Jonah first shared unspoken affection. They reached a cove where waves foamed against basalt. Elena knelt, dug a shallow hollow, and placed the box inside. She spoke softly. I release what hurt me. May it rest where tides will wear sharp edges smooth. Jonah covered the hole with sand, then pressed a flat stone atop. They stood, hands brushing. Elena felt weight lift, replaced by quiet vastness, an open sky laced with possibility. They walked back along the cliff, pausing when sunlight speared through clouds, illuminating distant sailboats. Jonah touched her shoulder. Dinner tonight at the inn. Elena smiled. Only if you let me choose dessert, Deal, he said, slipping his fingers through hers. Evening gleamed gold across harbor waters as they sat on the inn's veranda. A violinist played soft tunes. Elena tasted sea bass with lemon butter, savoring bright zest. For dessert she chose lemon drizzle cake, the flavor Margaret once named survival. Jonah raised his glass of sparkling water, to chapters still unwritten. Elena lifted hers, to living them with eyes wide open. They clinked rims, sunlight fracturing into tiny rainbows. Later they strolled the pier, lanterns swaying overhead. Elena watched reflections ripple, thinking of stolen lives honored by lantern light a year prior. She felt sorrow still, a gentle ache, but it no longer poisoned the well of joy. Jonah paused at the railing. I spoke to a cold case tech today. They matched a partial print in my sister's file to a drifter who died in custody years ago. It is not closure, but it is a step. Elena squeezed his hand. Steps matter. He nodded, breathing in salt air. So does company. They walked on. The moon rose, silvering the path. Elena reflected that trust, once shattered, could rebuild, not by erasing cracks but by weaving new threads of transparency and care. At the cottage doorstep Jonah kissed her gently, a question and a promise. She answered with soft certainty. When he left, Harbor greeted Elena, weaving around her ankles. She shut the door, lit a single candle on the mantel, and opened her journal. Time to write a new entry. She penned, Today the tide carried away a box of old ghosts. In their place the sea left a quiet hush, perfect for listening to my heartbeat. She closed the journal, extinguished the candle, and walked to the window where night stretched beyond the fence, wide and wild. Life awaited, tide by tide, word by word, and she would meet it unflinching. 6 months later Sarah's bakery thrived, its signature pastry called the Switch, a swirl of dark chocolate and white vanilla representing danger and rescue. Tourists lined up for slices, reading a framed plaque that donated part of each sale to a foundation supporting families of the missing. Detective Jonah Lefevre received commendation for closing the serial case and, with renewed evidence, solved his sister's disappearance, laying to rest a decade of uncertainty. Elena finished a memoir titled The Color of Trust, weaving cautionary tale with resilient hope. Advance copies drew praise for lyrical honesty. On release day she hosted a reading in the bakery's back garden, lanterns glowing. She ended with words that captured her journey. Survival is not a single act but a sustained practice. It is the decision to open curtains each morning, even when history hammers on the windowpane. It is acknowledging the shadow yet stepping into light, trusting that even fractured hearts can beat a steady chord. Applause rose. Jonah watched, pride softening his features. Elena caught his eye, and in that look lay a horizon of shared mornings, of tea steam and sea wind, of silent understanding that spoken words only begin to describe. Outside, tide shifted, gulls wheeled, and the world kept unfolding, bright, bruised, and beautifully resilient.